Well, believe it or not, it's time to start thinking about the holidays. We're going to focus on that coming up next. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the show. Well, it's hard to believe, but it's the time of bounty. The summer's over and all of that delicious produce has come in, and it's time to start thinking about the holidays. So I've got some ideas for you to think about. We'll get to it a little later in the show. Now, earlier this year, my staff planted their own vegetable garden at my city home where they're celebrating their harvest with a buffet-style party in the garden. We'll see how they got creative with the food and the table decorations. Plus, I'll show you a table setting at the farm that's decorated with apples. I also had a few gift ideas for the gardeners at heart. We're also going to check in on my web designer, Caleb, to see how his shrub planting's coming along. And don't forget, we'll answer a viewer question and learn how to make this scrumptious apple tart. Well, as you can see, we've got a lot going on in today's show. And when we return, we're going to check out our staff's harvest party. Now I'd like to show you an area of my city garden that my staff took over. They decided they wanted to grow a few of their own vegetables. Great idea, was very successful through the growing season, and now they're having a harvest party. So let's take a look at it. To create a buffet, a table was placed in the center of the garden where they used terracotta containers and bricks underneath burlap to give some lift to the decorations and the food. Then several pumpkins were added to the tablescape for a splash of color. Simple white plates and some simple flatware was used along with some kitchen tea towels for napkins. Then a few old garden tools and some vegetables from the garden were added to carry out the theme. Now, of course, we don't want to forget about the most important component of this party. That's the food. You see, it was strategically placed on the table, and I have to say, they got pretty creative when it came to the dishes that they served, using vegetables and herbs from the garden. Kale chips were very popular, along with the southern collard greens, steamed carrots with dill, spinach salad, potato salad, and a steaming dish of spinach dip. Well, this turned out to be a great experience. I'm only sad that I was out of town and missed it myself, but it was so popular, we're going to do another one in the spring. After the break, I'll show you a few gift ideas for the gardener in your life, so stay tuned. I don't know about you, but I enjoy receiving gifts that I can use. And as a gardener, I like gifts that are related to that hobby of gardening or improving my outdoor living space. Just want to give you an idea. In the fall of the year, you can find at farmers markets and so forth, bushel or half bushel baskets like this. Burlap is readily available. All of these things are relatively inexpensive. You can take this as the package, if you will, and fill it up with all kinds of goodies that you can pick up at your local garden center. A lot of these things begin to go on sale this time of year, and they're non-perishable. Now, some of them, like bulbs, for instance, you'd want to get planted as soon as possible. So let me just give you some tips on things you might add to a basket like this to give to a friend or a loved one. You could use bulbs. Certainly you would want some sort of bulb food that could be used to be placed in here, or really any kind of organic fertilizer. And then when it comes to controls, there are always issues in the garden to have to take care of. Anyone would appreciate having something to help take care of their plants throughout the winter. So an organic spray that would take care of pests. And then if we want to talk just a minute about birds, a whimsical birdhouse like this would be a great addition to a gift basket, along with some bird seed, which would come in handy through the winter. And then if we think about the spring ahead, there are all kinds of kits for starting plants, pots that you can use to step the plants up. Once you've started them in a container like this, which actually makes a little greenhouse, you can step them up into containers that are made of peat moss like this. And then what I would do is just completely fill the top and all the areas with various kinds of seed. Many of these could be started indoors during the winter, and then other seeds could be sown directly into the garden in the spring once the soil and temperatures warm up. So as you can see, you could tie a big bow around it. You could take some burlap and cover the top and wrap it up in any way you'd like. I would include maybe some holiday greenery. But the point is, you can put these things together in the late fall and have them ready to distribute when the holiday season rolls around. Okay, now I'd like to share with you a table setting that I created for the fall. Let's take a look. And this is the perfect time of year to do really abundant tablescaping, and that's what I've done here using, well, fruit from orchards. And these are various apples. A lot of them are modern and many are old-fashioned. There's a sweet crimson gold crab apple you can see here, as well as some old favorites like Granny Smith, Braeburn, McIntosh, and Gala. Now, what I've done is I've just placed them in some wooden bowls that I've had made years and years ago, and I just assembled them down the center of the table. And while I was at the grocery store, they were selling some of this maize, and I just cut off some of the tips of a bundle of that maize and just laid it in between these wooden bowls. And the wooden bowls are, of course, filled with the apples as well as the crab apples and some acorns. Now, if you'll take a look here, I made these little totems of apples, just using larger ones at the base and stair-stepping them up to one of those little crab apples on top. And all I did was use a bamboo skewer and ran it through them and then just stood them up vertically, so it gave some height to the table. Now, with regard to what I used as a centerpiece for my tablescaping and the dishes, you can see that all the colors work harmoniously. I tried to stick with a single color theme, and what I used for the color theme were these placemats. I picked those up at a discount store, and sadly they only had 6, but it's perfect for this table setting. So with the browns and the golds and yellows and oranges all mixing in here together, they really echo the colors of the harvest that we have in the center of the table. And as far as the plates go and the glassware, it's just a mixture of things. Some are some hand-thrown plates combined with some that, again, I picked up at a discount store, and the glassware the same. Some is old, and these little glasses that I already have some great apple cider in are some that I just picked up recently. They seem to fit the season and fit this tablescape. The thing to do is to mix things together, follow a central theme, and this one is, of course, apples and orchards for the fall. And of course, if you'll follow a color theme, it makes a really big difference. And I like to, of course, illuminate the table, and I have about, well, I always go overboard with candles, but it does make the table sparkle. I think we have about 24 of these votives on the table, so when the guests arrive, it'll just be all aglow, and that beautiful golden light will, again, echo this color harmony. Okay, we need to take another short break, but when we return, we'll talk to Caleb about some of the shrubs that he's planting in his front landscape, so stick around. Now it's time to check in on my web designer, Caleb Rash. You see, Caleb and his wife have been doing a little work in their yard, and today it's all about planting some shrubs. Let's see if he needs any help. I'm liking what I'm seeing here. We've got the bed shape all lined out. That looks good, and the soil quality here is good. It started really with a basic clay, but we've added a lot of humus in the way of an all-purpose growing mix. By combining this with the soil, what you want to do is you want to get it where when you get a handful of it like that, it breaks apart in your hand. So I think we're in good shape. Now what we're going to do is start setting out some of these perennials and shrubs. I've suggested that we use some azaleas here. These are large indica azaleas. They have big blooms on them, beautiful in the spring. Down on the far end, I've got some spirea, an old-fashioned variety that sort of fits the period of this house, which was built in the 30s. It's Spirea van Hoodii, the old-fashioned bridal wreath spirea. And here we're going to just continue with some of the catnip across the front. And I think this is consistent with what Caleb had in mind. That's great, because you want to blend some of this good humus in with your existing soil even more. That's looking great, Caleb. Caleb, I'm going to move the shrub in here. All right, now look, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the level is very important. You don't want to plant them too deeply. And we may have a little too much, so well, I don't know, that's going to be all right. I like for the root ball of the plant to be about a ½ inch above, particularly with azaleas because they're shallow rooted. And then we want to make sure that the best side of the plant is turned outward, and I think we've got that. And you see how large a hole we dug? You really want that really good, loose, friable soil that has a good mixture with that humus in around it when we plant it. So what's next is I want you to start adding some soil.
So why are we adding water as we're planting this?
Well, I mean, it'll help. We want to hydrate the plant totally, the root ball. And as I mentioned, if there's any air pockets in there, what'll happen is it'll dissolve the soil and it'll fill in those air pockets so you get a good consistent level of soil around the plant, which makes the plant happy. Now look at go back to the size of the hole here. What I like to do is take for a $5 plant, a $50 hole. So of course we paid a little more, I think, than $5 for this plant, but you know what I mean. You just want a nice generous hole with it. All right, now I think we can bring that water hose around, Caleb, and get started soaking it in. Now reach over there and grab some of this soil, Caleb, with your shovel and start adding the soil around as we're filling it up with water here. Now, you know, the fall is this is a great time of year to be getting the stuff planted because these will actually root in over the course of the fall. We're getting them planted early enough that they will root in. Now let's take a look at a viewer question. Today we have a question from Manhattan, Kansas. Missy. Missy writes, Alan, what do you suggest is the best way to protect my vegetable plants in the fall if the temperatures start to get a little too cool? Well, Missy, protecting your plants is a great way to extend the garden season. In fact, a good friend of mine, Lois Chaplin, was recently out at the farm and she shows us a great way to protect your vegetable plants into the fall.
Hi, I'm at Alan's 1-acre vegetable garden here at the Garden Home Retreat, looking to see what he planted. This fall, he set out Chinese cabbage and collards and all kinds of hardy greens. They've had a really hard winter here in Little Rock, and Alan put a frost blanket over his vegetables, and look at that. Beautiful Chinese cabbage. Almost perfect, except for just a little bit of damage at the bottom. These are certainly good enough to eat, and probably protected by 5 or 6 or 8 degrees by this row cover. This cover is something that you have to order from agricultural supply companies or mail order companies, but the beauty of it is that the light gets through, the water gets through, the plants can breathe, and it's not like pine straw or a blanket that you have to put on and take off and put on and take off. This can stay out here all winter long and protect your vegetables. So literally you could have a harvest of lettuce or collards or kale or cabbage, arugula, parsley, beautiful green and lush and even growing some all through winter.
After this quick break, we'll learn about how to make this delicious apple recipe. You don't want to miss it. I have a great dessert that is sure to make all of your holiday guests very, very happy. Patrick Heron of Terry's Finer Foods shows us how to make this delicious apple tart.
All right, we're going to do an apple tart tatin today, a classic French dessert, which is basically an upside-down apple pie. First, we're going to start out with about 9 ounces of butter. Make that 7 ounces of butter. This is a non-stick Teflon pan with a high edge on it so that you can get all your apples and stuff into it. We're going to take 3/4 cups of regular sugar and almost half a cup of sugar in the raw. Not brown sugar, it's a little different. It's not as dark, not as molasses in flavor. We're going to let this develop into a little bit of a caramel sauce. The caramel sauce will take about 5 to 6 minutes to set up. You don't want it to turn too brown before you add your apples because you're going to cook your apples in the caramel sauce, which gives the apples a real rich flavor. Right here, our caramel's starting to develop where the edge is getting brown. We're going to cut down the heat just a little bit. Then we're going to layer the apples in one at a time, side by side, which we've peeled, cut into quarters, facing the same direction. And as these cook, the moisture coming out of them is going to form more of the sauce. But you want to get them in pretty tight. Already you're getting a good golden caramel color on the apples. And they will shrink a little bit, so you can stuff them in there as tight as you can before you put on the pastry crust. You know, we got our apples in there nice and tight. We're gonna put the top on it. Cut your heat off. And this is called pâté brisé, which is basically pie crust with a little bit of sugar in it to make it sweet. We're gonna fold it over and take the edges from the overlap. You wanna overlap about a ½ inch all the way around. Then you take the back of a wooden spoon or utensil and push it down in, just to seal in a little bit of that caramel sauce. Cut a little chimney for it to steam to come out of. And then this is ready to go in the oven for about 30 minutes or until this crust is really golden brown. When that comes out, flip it over and you'll have your apple tart tatin.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And I want to make sure that you check out that recipe because it is so good and it's easy to make. You can find it on my website, pallensmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.